All right, so we are live now. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. We have a really good one for you. So this is something I will admit came about through somewhat selfishly because I myself am looking for a way to power my home during an outage. And that's, quite frankly, I think many of you have the same story during the derecho in May, during Beryl in July. I think, homeowners who have never considered alternative power sources or ways to get yourself through an outage before are starting to look for that. So we're excited about today's live event. Uh, as you're joining us and getting settled in, if you could just drop in the chat where you're joining us from. This is a little HC Live tradition that we have. We just love to see the different neighborhoods and parts of Houston or Texas that you're tuning in from. If you're at work from downtown, someone dropping in already from League City, from the Heights, Richmond, Bel Air, Humble, West Columbia. All right. All right, Louisiana. That's interesting. And while everyone is dropping in where they're tuning in from, I'm going to go ahead and read the bios from our expert guests here and just wait for more people to join us. Keep those comments coming. Wow, Sugarland, Maplewood. Very cool to see so many people tuning in from different parts of Houston. Um, so today we have with us Paul Hope. He is a deputy home editor at Consumer Reports. At Consumer Reports, he writes about some of the very tools, gadgets, and appliances he likes to use at home: ranges, grills, building materials, and outdoor power equipment. As an avid DIYer, he has restored 5 old houses in the last 10 years, and in his free time, he is a classically trained chef who loves to cook, particularly on one of 5 grills he currently owns. That's really amazing. Also with us today is America Garcia. America Garcia is the Texas Program Director for Solar United Neighbors, a 501c3 nonprofit organization dedicated to solar education, advocacy, and consumer protection. Um, America carries an extensive background in the retail electricity market and grassroots organizing. And you might recognize Solar United Neighbors because we profiled them previously in a December 2023 story on their work establishing solar-powered energy hubs in low-income neighborhoods during outages. So very relevant to what we're talking about today. And then, of course, Claire Hao, you probably have recognized her byline in so many of our energy stories and stories on the Texas Power Grid. She is our Texas Power Grid reporter. She covers clean energy and other electricity topics. And she previously spent a year covering climate and environment for the San Francisco Chronicle. So really excited to have Claire here with us today. It is now 11:03, so I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to you, Claire, and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. I'm really excited to have this conversation. Like Jennifer said, I cover energy in the Texas Power Grid for the Houston Chronicle. And just before we begin, we wanted to set the stage a little bit for this conversation and what we hope for it to be. So I know that, like a lot of you, I've been trying to think about how to power my home during an outage. And so we envision this event as an event for people who are just starting to think about this. So not for people who might have already done a lot of research or who already have a generator or who already have a proposal from a solar installer. So we won't be able to answer any specific questions, troubleshooting your specific situation in this webinar, but we will offer resources and contact information at the end in case you do have any of those questions. And so to begin, Paul and America, I wanted to ask, for people here who might be like Jennifer, who are homeowners who are just starting the process of looking into backup power options, what should they consider as they weigh whether to buy a generator or whether to invest in rooftop solar panels and home battery storage?
I certainly won't try to sell generators over solar or home backup battery power. But what I will say about generators is the key thing they offer is a consistent source of backup power in the event of an outage. Their big advantage is, of course, that they can run indefinitely because they run on either natural gas, propane, or in most cases, gasoline. There are also a handful that run on diesel fuel. But those tend to be less common. So the real advantage to a generator is, of course, that you can continue to power anything as long as you have access to a steady supply of fuel. So if you have a home standby or whole house generator, that means that if you have natural gas from your city or town, you basically have unlimited power for the entire duration of the outage. if you have, propane delivery service, a typical propane tank is usually big enough to provide anywhere from 10 to 21 days of backup power with a home standby generator. So again, that is plenty to get through most outages. If you have a portable generator, you're going to use anywhere from probably 10 to 20 gallons of gasoline a day to power something resembling an entire household load. So, it's worth considering that yes, you do have an unlimited supply of power, but of course, you're going to have to do a lot of legwork and a lot of prep work to make sure that you have everything you need to keep that generator running for the entire duration of the outage.
And America, how would you pitch, I guess, solar and battery storage to people who might be considering that option?
I think there are a couple of things that need to be considered before installing solar panels. I would consider your energy needs. For example, I live in a 2,200 square foot townhome. Typically, townhomes are not this large. However, I consume close to 3,000 because I work from home, my husband works from home. There are people who consume less than half of that. There are people whose homes are half of the size of mine, if not smaller. I would also consider the roof condition. What condition is your roof in? Do you have a lot of trees around your roof to where it would just be way more expensive to get those trees cut? Of course, you're getting rid of the trees. Trees also provide shade. Consider the location and inclination of your roof as well. Look into local regulations, and of course, finding a reputable installer. And I'll go more into detail. I do have some websites to share in that regard.
Great, thank you. And to answer one of the questions I already see, yes, we do plan to upload this webinar onto YouTube sometime at least by the end of this week. So it will be available for rewatch. And so I know we're just getting started on this conversation. And for each of the technologies that you're an expert in, Paul, what are the pros and cons of a generator? In America, what are the pros and cons of solar plus batteries?
Sure. The big pro of a generator is, of course, that you have unlimited access to backup power. So, right off the bat, I think when most people start to think about generators, they think of what we call home standby or whole house generators. Those are the ones you may have seen at hospitals or schools or other essential settings like a nursing home. And they're sort of the gold standard in generators. They're really ideal for places or for people who simply can't afford to be without power for any length of time. So they're an absolute necessity for somebody who might have, say, life-supporting medical equipment that requires electricity. They're really the only sort of viable option for that scenario. They're also a great option for people who live in an area with sort of routine interruptions to the power supply. So, if you live in an area that's, in the path of hurricanes frequently, in an area with unreliable electric delivery to households, it's a great option because they kick on automatically in an outage. And as I previously mentioned, can run either indefinitely or in almost all cases for at least a week without having to refuel them. Um, that said, they tend to be very expensive. Whole house generators are anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000, if not more, just to buy. And you can easily spend that much or more on the installation process, depending on labor costs in your area, permitting, things like that. So all told, it's not uncommon for someone to lay out $20,000 or $25,000 to install a whole home generator. That's even more likely to be true if you don't currently have gas service or propane at your home. Um, a much more cost-effective option for a lot of people is what we call portable generators. And the name is a little bit misleading because some of them weigh upwards of 200 pounds. But essentially what these are generators that range in size from, like a small suitcase all the way up to a 3 foot by 3 foot box on wheels, basically. And the idea is people typically store these generators in their garage or an outbuilding and wheel them out only when they're needed in the event of a power outage. They tend to be a lot cheaper. They start around $400. They do go up to about $5,000 for the really sort of top of the line models, but most people will probably be well served by a generator that's anywhere from $800 to $1,200 in that category. You just need to be ready to buy and store a lot of gasoline and keep it running, through the duration of an outage.
I want to talk first about the pros of going solar. First, I want to tell people in Houston specifically, resiliency is important. I unfortunately didn't have power for about a week, maybe a little bit longer. So let's say Monday to Saturday. And it honestly felt like a year. I was obviously very desperate. I was very hot. My poor animals were just, nobody was doing well. And personally, I don't feel like you can put a price on peace of mind. So resiliency is honestly should be top of your mind whenever considering going solar and pairing it with a battery. I do want to mention that if you only have solar on your home, you will not be able to use your panels during an outage because the grid cannot be backfed, as in it's dangerous for the workers that are trying to get the grid back online, and it can potentially, harm them. There is financial savings to going solar. I'm seeing bills anywhere from $350 to $450 in my home. As I stated, solar can help decrease the price of your monthly bill. Nationally, the average installation cost is around $3 a watt. With cash, of course, you will see the most savings. But even if you are getting a loan and you're decreasing your electricity bill, you'll still see some savings from what you're paying monthly without either of those two sources. You'll also have that peace of mind when paired with a battery, because let's say you have critical loads at home, such as refrigerators, freezers. Somebody in your home has to be hooked up to a machine in order to breathe, anything like that, you'll have that peace of mind. And it's also a clean energy resource. What I would say are the cons would be, of course, the cost. The cost does vary. We typically tell people to not oversize their system. Unfortunately, many installers do want to sell people a much bigger solar array system than they actually need. Keep in mind that in the future, you can always add more panels if you were to have to do so. Of course, solar is dependent on sunlight, so its output would be reduced on cloudy days. And there are, of course, capacity limitations when having solar. For example, a Tesla Powerwall at the moment is, one Tesla Powerwall is 13.5 kilowatt hours. So you do have to be choosy with what it is that you choose to power whenever there is an outage.
Well, thank you both of you for this overview of the technology that you're an expert in. I wanted to have some time dedicated to each technology, just so that we can talk about generators for a while, and all generators for people that are interested in that, and then all solar and batteries for people that are interested in that. And Paul, I know you've already answered some of these questions, but could you talk a little bit more on, the different types of generators you mentioned, from the whole home to the portable and all the different cost options? How do you decide not only on the right size generator, but also the right price generator for your situation?
For sure. So, as I mentioned, the most crucial consideration is which type you'll get, because that is the single biggest difference. So in most cases, if you decide to buy a whole home or home standby generator, you'll be working with a contractor and or a salesperson, often at an outdoor power equipment supplier, who can make specific sizing recommendations based upon your needs. As America said, not unlike with solar, it's not uncommon for consumers to try to be, or for people to try to upsell consumers on the size of a whole home generator. Typically, if you're looking at just powering the essentials, most people can get away with 7 to 10,000 watts of output for a whole home generator. That said, the sizing goes up to 26,000 watts, even 30,000 watts you'll see sometimes. I mean, that's beyond what most people will ever need. That's like if you wanted to, basically put on your heat and AC at the same time and let them fight each other while on backup power. It's just far more than a typical household consumes. So what you want to do in terms of sizing is go around your house, look at the essentials, and get wattage estimates. The EPA has a wattage calculator on their website. It's great. But you can also just look at the little tags that are on the appliances themselves. So if you have an electric stove, a dishwasher, space heaters, if you happen to have window air conditioners, all of those, but also a central AC unit, all of those things will have a placard on them somewhere that says the total power consumption, or it can be looked up online. So think about in an emergency what those things are that you'd want to consider powering. Obviously, it should include essentials like refrigerators, deep freezers, dehumidifiers, sump pumps. Those are all sort of the most essential things. Tier two is probably heating or cooling equipment for your home. So obviously, there are instances where you won't be able to shelter in place without some kind of heating or cooling. It simply won't be safe. So you want to make sure you have a system that's sized to power, ACs, central AC, and or heating equipment in the winter. Um, and then obviously any generator is going to be able to do the bare basics like charging phones, some laptops, things you're going to need to be able to stay in communication, and some lighting. So anything else is really sort of a luxury item, things like, being able to use your stove or being able to use a coffee maker, or anything else. So tally those things all up together. Remember that you don't need to be able to power them all at once. You only have to power most of those things at once. So for example, unless you plan on brewing coffee and doing a load of laundry and roasting a turkey all at the same time, you only need a generator that can accommodate one of those tasks at once. You don't need to buy one that can do all three at the same time. But again, as with solar panels, try not to get upsold on something bigger than what you need, and really consider what's important to you to power.
And can you walk through the process of buying a generator? So what is the first step and what are the different things that you should consider? Are you, yeah, what kind, as people sell generators to you, are there any red flags to look for, or are there other things that you should look for in a good proposal?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, the place most people start is with a whole home generator. But because they're so expensive, the vast majority of people, about 95% of people, end up going with some version of a portable generator. Once you're shopping for a portable generator, you're typically buying them from Lowe's or Home Depot, maybe a local retailer, or hardware store. So there are quite a few things to look for. Obviously, I'm biased, but Consumer Reports, we're an independent nonprofit, and we do all of our own testing. So we buy the models that we test and include ratings for on our website. We buy them just from Home Depot or Lowe's like a regular consumer would, and we test those. So obviously, I would advise anybody buying a portable generator to start with our ratings to look for models that actually perform really well. Beyond that, sizing is of course key. As I mentioned, it's pretty easy to figure out the capacity you'll need for a generator. There's no harm in going up a little bit, but you want to find a sweet spot, because basically if you buy a portable generator that's way more than you actually need, it's just going to burn extra gasoline, and it's going to be that much more of a headache to keep it going through a sustained outage. So, some models use as little as 8 or 10 gallons a day. A really big, oversized one might burn through 20, even 24 gallons of gasoline in a single day, which, might be fine for a 1 day outage. But if, like America or many other people, you've experienced a sustained outage that goes on for a week, I mean, that's an insane amount of gasoline to have to keep on hand. So anything you can do to try to keep consumption down, the better. So be logical about the size you're getting, be realistic about your needs. And yeah, and turn to our ratings, if you want to know what actually performs well.
Speaking of Consumer Reports and your ratings, so I know that you all have a really interesting process of testing the generators. Can you talk a little bit about how exactly you all went about reviewing generators, or how what you look for as you review whether a generator performs well or not?
Absolutely. So I'll start by mentioning that we test both portable and whole home generators, and we have ratings for both on our website. And the process is very similar for both. So we have a dedicated testing facility in Yonkers, New York, which is just north of New York City. We have a 25-acre campus. And we have multiple testing sites actually for generators. We have an outdoor facility, and then we have what is essentially a truck trailer where we do a lot of our proprietary safety testing. In terms of performance, what we essentially do is hook up a generator to some of the most power hungry things we can find and basically try to make it fail. In so many ways, we plug in space heaters and window ACs and basically all the highest wattage stuff that a consumer might want to power in an emergency, because honestly, it's crucial that a generator be able to power a lot of those things, especially things like space heaters or window ACs, because they can, in some cases, be life-saving if there's a sustained outage and there's extreme weather. So we see which generators are capable of powering those devices, which shut down or fail prematurely. And then we measure what's called power quality, which is really a measure of whether you're getting sort of high quality electricity from the generator as you would from a typical power grid. And it's a very specific thing that most people may not even know about. But there are certain sensitive electronics, especially things like stereo systems, home theaters, speakers, that are very sensitive to sort of running on low quality power that people might not even know is an issue. The last thing we really test for is safety. And generators are a potentially life-saving device, but they're also inherently dangerous. About 65 people a year die from carbon monoxide poisoning from running gasoline-powered generators. It is only recently that most generators have started to comply with one of two voluntary safety standards, both of which CR was involved in and helped advocate for. And so most modern generators now come with an automatic safety shutoff switch, which essentially determines if someone is maybe accidentally using a generator indoors or in an enclosed garage with the door open, both of which you should really, really avoid. A generator now should actually be able to determine an unsafe buildup of carbon monoxide near the tool and automatically shut it off to save someone's life. It's worth noting that a generator can kill someone in as little as 5 minutes if it's used indoors and allowed to run at full tilt without one of these safety devices. And I believe we actually have some video of our testing facility where I think we do some of the safety testing and some of our other testing as well.
When the electricity goes out, a portable generator helps keep your essential appliances up and running. Our engineers test whether a generator delivers the wattage it promises. This test assesses how well a generator can handle surges in demand, say when your AC compressor kicks on. We check how efficiently each generator uses gasoline and how long a generator will run. The best in our tests run at least 9 hours on a single tank of gas. Most important, you want to keep the power on safely. It's why we only recommend generators with carbon monoxide sensing technology. In order to test that technology, we place each generator inside this vessel. It's wired with calibrated CO sensors. The CO levels are recorded, and our testers watch from a safe distance to see whether or not a generator turns off when the CO levels become potentially dangerous.
Thank you for sharing that. And talking about safety, I think you mentioned already a little bit about how generators emit carbon monoxide and how that can be dangerous. So can you just talk in more detail about how to safely use a generator during an outage? But also, I see in the comments people are also wondering, how do you safely store fuel for use for these generators?
Absolutely. So the short answer is if you buy a whole home or a home standby generator, the contractor is going to install it in compliance with local building codes. And typically those generators can be installed much closer to a house. You don't really need to worry about that as a homeowner because, again, it's going to be inspected by a building department. And also those generators tend to produce far fewer emissions in the first place. For the 90+% of us who will end up with a portable generator that runs on gas, there are definitely some precautions. The first of which is not only should you never use it indoors, you want to make sure the generator is at least 20 feet away from your house with the exhaust directed away from any windows or doors. It's worth noting that unlike, say, a car, a generator really doesn't have, in most cases, emissions limiting components. So it really can produce far more carbon monoxide than even a full-size car. So in addition to keeping it 20 feet away, you need to figure out how you're going to get the power from the generator to your home. The best way to do that is having an electrician install what's called either an interlock device or a transfer switch. And they're basically two different versions of the same thing, or they have the same goal. They allow you to run power from your generator directly to a big outlet on the side of your house and then power whole circuits on your home circuit breaker. It's really the ideal solution because it means you don't need to use a million extension cords to get power from the generator inside your house. It also means that you aren't limited to only things with a plug. So it's really a good thing to install. It typically costs between $500 and $1,500 to have an electrician do that. And obviously it's something you want to do well ahead of a storm, just like shopping for a generator in the first place, because you're not going to be able to get an electrician in to do that, in the run up to a storm. That said, most people will at some point have to use their generator with extension cords. You want to make sure you have at least one extension cord per high wattage device that you want to power. So each space heater, for example, should have its own cord, as with window ACs, same with refrigerator or deep freezer. You want to make sure that the cords are heavy duty and rated to be used outdoors and obviously long enough to go all the way from your generator to whatever it is that you're trying to plug in. Lastly, on the gas front, you want to buy what are called ANSI approved containers. They're basically those red plastic cans that we've all seen people filling up, that we all use for our lawnmowers and whatever else. You do need a fair amount of them. You can get them at home centers and hardware stores, but you want to specifically use those containers. Ideally, you want to store gasoline in an outbuilding, if at all possible, a detached garage or a shed, something like that. And the last piece of the puzzle is that you need to remember that gasoline doesn't last forever. So home centers like Lowe's and Home Depot, True Value also sell what's called fuel stabilizer. It's basically a small container of something that looks not unlike gasoline itself. Basically, you want to put a cap full of that into each container of gasoline that you're storing. That will take your gasoline from lasting about 30 days all the way up to about 18 months, even 2 years in some cases. So it means that you can just buy a ton of gasoline once, have it on standby for up to 2 years in case you do have an outage, and then you'll have everything you need for sustained outage. And if you don't use it in that time and you're lucky and you don't have the power go out, you can always use a funnel and just pour it right into your car before it goes bad.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Paul, for that overview of the basic information you should know when using a generator. I know there's so much more to get into, and I'm hoping that we can do that in some of the audience questions at the end of this. But for now, I want to turn to America to talk about solar and battery backup. So America, I also want to start with the basics here too. I saw a question about how solar works and how solar and battery storage work together. So I'm hoping maybe you can start there, and then talk a little bit about what these devices can power in your home.
All right. So basically, whenever you have your solar panels installed on the home, they are tied to an inverter. The inverter then goes to your electrical panel, which allows the electricity to power your home. You did ask a little bit about the loads to power. Is that correct, Claire?
Right.
That
So
really
if you
depends.
what can you power with the solar and battery backup?
Yeah, that's completely up to the homeowner themselves. And I say that because everybody's needs are going to be different. No home consumes energy in the same way, just like two people do not consume energy in the same way. So for me, the AC and maybe a TV might be more important to me, but for some people, it's going to be the fridge, a freezer, possibly medications, any machines that are possibly keeping people alive. And I do want to talk a little bit about going solar. It's really important to do your research. We do have guides available at Sun for free. So you do have these resources at your hand. We have Go Solar guides. We have battery guides. We also have a really helpful help desk, and we do take pride in being able to help people and answering questions whenever they reach out to us. Some people are in the deregulated market. Some people are not in the deregulated market. Some people are in Puerto Rico when they reach out. People reach out from all across the nation. So please feel free to reach out to us anytime that you have any questions. We also have a resource called the Texas Power Guide. And this is a really helpful resource whenever you're considering going solar, because they'll analyze your last year's usage, and they'll tell you which plan it is on the market that's best for you. Of course, it is important to have the correct plan if you're in the deregulated market, because if you aren't having the plan that could be the most beneficial for you, you obviously aren't going to see the most savings then. Whenever looking for an installer, it's important to seek references. If you know somebody who went solar and has a battery, ask them about their experience. Energy Sage is a really helpful website. They allow you to compare information, and you can also read reviews. And when it comes to solar and battery, so instead of powering your home or powering the grid, the battery is going to charge. So that means that during an outage, your entire home won't have backup power, likely, but you can choose which outlets and which appliances that you want on backup.
Great. Well, you hit several topics that I wanted to talk about. First, I wanted to ask, how you pick. I saw a question about, if there's a specific formula or methodology for choosing the size of your panels or choosing how big a battery is. I know, of course, that depends on, how much of your home you want to keep the lights on for in an outage. But in general, is there like some sort of guideline for how you pick both the kind of battery or the kind of solar panels or the size of the system?
That's a really good question. There is no one size fits all answer to this because, like I said, every home is different. You have to keep in mind that, of course, like if your home is weatherized, if you upgraded your windows, if your insulation is older or newer, if your home is newer or older, so many things to consider, so many things to keep in mind. One thing I would say is gather multiple proposals. If you have somebody at your door who's asking, like, I sell solar, sure, give me a quote. You can always reach out to us at the Solar Help Desk. And we typically tell people they can get up to 3 proposals, and we'll go over them. We'll analyze which might be the best for them.
Speaking of looking for an installer, what are some questions that, of course, get multiple proposals, compare them, don't feel pressured to say yes immediately to the person that's knocking on your door. But when you look at all the proposals that you receive, are there any questions that you should ask or any red flags to look out for?
Yes. Ask about your warranties. Ask if your solar system is going to have a warranty. Ask about inverter warranties. Ask if you need to do any upgrades to your electrical panel. You do need to have space on your electrical panel. And of course, if your electrical panel is a little bit older, you may need to do some upgrades to that, which of course is an additional charge. And also ask about your roof. Is your roof in good shape? Did you just get your roof replaced? Is your roof 15 years old? Of course, here with the weather, I do tend to notice that the roofs don't last as long here as they would in other places that I've lived at. So these are all things to keep in mind.
And how does the installation process work? So I know, there's permitting, there's also an application to connect to the grid. Can you walk through both what to expect for all of these different processes and also how long it typically takes?
Yeah. So the installation process goes like this. You'll go into permitting. So you signed a contract and your installer is now going to work with the permitting department in your area. Then you'll have your install. Typically, the installs are done anywhere from 1 to 2 days. You'll wait for interconnection, and this means that once your system is installed, you'll have to receive permission from your local utility. So maybe CenterPoint, somebody's from Lake City, and I believe your utility is TNMP. And I do want to remind you that your installer will take care of all of this. You'll have some paperwork to sign, but they'll handle this entire process.
And also, can you talk about, so of course with solar and batteries, typically this is a longer term investment for people. Most people don't pay the cost to go up front, they take out a loan. So how does that loan process work? Are there any government rebates or credits that there are to take advantage of? And also, are there any red flags to look out in financing this kind of investment?
Yeah, so people kind of go about paying for their systems in a multitude of ways. Some people pull out a home equity line of credit. Some people, of course, do have the money so they can pay for it outright. Some people do finance through their bank. The installers typically offer financing as well. Some people go through green bank. So there are a multitude of ways. And I also want to add that there is a 30% federal income tax credit at the moment. So if you have the tax appetite, keep in mind, I'm not a tax advisor. So, take this with a grain of salt. If you do have a tax appetite, you will be able to get that 30%. And you can also split it. So let's say you want to do 10% 1 year, 10% another year, 10% the year after that. So it can be broken up. Of course, speak to your tax advisor or lawyer. And any red flags. I would definitely say that if somebody's telling you something that seems too good to be true, it probably is. Unfortunately, there are a lot of solar scams. There are a lot of people that are lied to in this process. People are told, well, you're never going to get a bill ever again, which is, of course, untrue, because if you were to only have solar, you still need power at night. So you're still going to receive a bill. However, if you have solar and battery and you're not using your battery storage at night, you're, of course, going to have a bill. So CenterPoint must receive their cut, of course. They provide a service. They own the poles and the wires. So it is important to keep that in mind. When it comes to solar scams, unfortunately, the Texas AG has about 2,000 complaints sitting on his desk. And Solar United Neighbors also does advocacy work around that. What we want is people to understand solar, understand what the process is like. We have videos on YouTube that are Solar 101s. We explain the technology, the terminology, and we also explain the financing and such.
Seen some questions too about maintenance of solar panels. So once you get these panels installed and ready to go, are there any best practices in keeping them clean, or what do we do when we get a big hailstorm here in Texas?
Yeah, solar panels are typically pretty low maintenance. You shouldn't have to worry about cleaning them. I do believe that it does rain here enough for them to basically be washed off or anything along those lines. If you do have any serious concerns, I would reach out to your installer. And when it comes to hailstorms, so panels are actually extremely resilient and they will actually help protect your roof. So that's an added benefit of going solar as well.
Great. And is there anything else that you think I'm missing? Other basic information about solar and battery storage that you want to address before I open it up to both of you to talk a little bit more about your technologies or for other questions?
Yes, I cannot stress enough to when you are doing your research, please do not go through social media websites. I've seen so much misinformation, unfortunately, on the internet, just like with everything else. There are useful pages. As I said, Solar United Neighbors provide plenty of free guidance. We have people you can talk to. You can email people that I work with. You can email me to answer any of your questions. As I stated, Energy Sage is also a really helpful tool. And it's really important to get multiple proposals. I probably wouldn't, I like to think that we wouldn't buy just the first thing that we're offered, but at times I do understand that we're pressured to do so. These are unfortunately sales tactics, so keep that in mind.
And one last question for you, America, actually, before we go to questions about those technologies again. I know that your background is in working on electricity plans. So can you advise, once you do have solar and batteries, how does finding an electricity plan differ than beforehand?
Yes. So unfortunately, the deregulated market does add an additional layer of complexity. However, you shouldn't have to worry. And that's why I mentioned Texas Power Guide earlier, because they can help you go over what plans are on the market, what plan might be best for you. For some people, switching is not the option. As Jennifer stated earlier, we've done work in Northeast Houston where homes have been turned into hub homes or resiliency centers in their neighborhoods. When we analyze these residents' bills, when we send it to Texas Power Guide, and the cost of an early termination fee is assessed, and when you take into consideration how much it is they're paying and how much it is that they're using on the day-to-day. Sometimes it just doesn't make sense. So definitely look into Texas Power Guide because they'll be able to help you. Plans change all the time, sometimes twice a month. So it is good to have this as an additional resource.
Great. Well, thank you so much to both of you for providing that general overview about finding the right technology for your situation, what the process looks like. Paul, I'm seeing several questions on whole home generators, so I want to get back to you and ask about that. So I'm seeing one question, about if there's any safety issues to be aware of when using a whole home generator. And then another question asks about natural gas supply issues. This questioner says that some people had issues finding that during Beryl, and if that is usually an issue that plagues that kind of technology during storms.
Sure. Both great questions. So I will say, in general, there are very few, if any, safety concerns with a whole home generator. It's not unheard of, but it just so pales in comparison to the safety concerns with portables that it's really quite infrequent. Most of the instances of accidental carbon monoxide ingestion that come from whole home generator installations typically come from cases wherein somebody's installed it improperly, usually without going through a permitting process or using a licensed contractor, or ideally both, which is really what you want to do. And there are cases where they may not be installed in compliance with local building codes. Not unlike in regular light, not unlike a power plant, for example, we know that natural gas is imperfect, but at least still far cleaner than burning oil, for example, for power. The same is true for generators. So natural gas and propane power generators do still produce some carbon monoxide, but it really pales in comparison to the amount produced by a gasoline burning generator. I'm sorry, the second piece of that question, Claire.
Right, I should have asked one question at a time.
That's okay.
So the second question was, this person said that they had heard some people had issues finding natural gas during Hurricane Beryl, and that made it hard to power their whole home generators. So is the supply of natural gas or propane or whatever other fuel people are using for the generators, can that be something to navigate when you have this kind of technology?
It can. I mean, generally speaking, it is not unlike electricity itself. Natural gas supply is only as reliable as the provider that you have. Most places in America that have natural gas service have the infrastructure to deliver it uninterrupted. Natural gas supply lines tend to be run underground, so they're generally not damaged during hurricanes or other severe weather events. So they do tend to stay intact for those. Propane is a little bit different. Propane, you typically have to have a large storage tank installed somewhere at your house, and then you get periodic deliveries from a propane delivery company. That can be a little bit dicier, of course, because very often if there's going to be if a lot of people are anticipating a power outage and/or there are trees down, limits to transportation, it can be harder to get propane delivery. So it's very crucial that you work with a company that you trust. And that you try to do everything you can to get a propane delivery so that your tank is full far ahead of any hurricane making landfall. That said, not unlike I will say that even though there can be minor hiccups in acquiring that, it typically pales in comparison to the hiccups we see with people acquiring gasoline during an outage. It's not uncommon. I'm sure anyone who's been through an outage has probably seen that many gas stations also lose their power during an outage, and a handful will typically keep the power on, usually because they actually have a generator. But those gas stations tend to get flooded with demand. I myself lived through a hurricane a few years ago and had to wait 2.5 hours to fill up my car and get canisters of fuel for my generator. So it's crucially important to try to fill up gas containers if you do have a portable generator well in advance of any outage, and make sure you have them on hand so that you're not, trying to buy gas at the very same time that everyone else in your area is.
And I realized I forgot to ask you this question, Paul, that I asked America earlier. And one of our attendees has this question as well. Even when you're not using generators, are there any ongoing maintenance needs to be aware of?
Whole home generators or home standby generators are often serviced by a technician. Typically, you can talk to the contractor who installs it, or the facility from which you buy it. And then they automatically, most whole home generators will automatically cycle on once a week and perform what's called a self-test. Basically, they're just running for about 10 or 15 minutes to make sure that everything is working properly, and that's your way of making sure that it would kick on in the event of an outage. There's really no maintenance for a homeowner to do with that. With a portable generator, you certainly want to start it up and try to use it for the first time before you have an emergency. You know that an emergency is not the time you want to discover that you have no idea how to use a generator. Aside from that, in terms of just regular maintenance, you do want to periodically change out the gasoline. You know, as I mentioned, you want to make sure to only use stabilized gasoline. Um, and periodically, you may need to drain the gasoline that is stored in the generator if it's sat there for 18 months or 2 years, because it will eventually go bad and then the generator won't start in the event of an emergency. And then they need periodic oil changes too. It's not a huge deal. There's usually a little drain plug on the bottom of a generator. You can drain the oil, close the plug, and buy generator lubricating oil at a home center and top it off. It's like a very simple version of what people do with a car. You can also hire a handy person to do that if it's not something you're comfortable doing yourself.
Got it. And America, a few questions for you. So I've seen this question a few times now. Can you talk a little bit about, if somebody has an electric vehicle, if that electric vehicle can power a home during an outage?
That's a good question. Let me get back to you on that. Not to my knowledge, but I could be incorrect. So I will get back to you on that.
And then one person also asked, if there's any benefits or if you would recommend installing just a battery. So just like a Tesla Powerwall or other kind of battery without installing solar panels.
This is kind of a tricky one to answer. I would say that depends. Because your battery would be charged from the grid. So I'm not really sure there's any sort of like added benefit. It can be done, but it's not recommended because the cost of electricity to charge that battery, obviously there would be a charge versus, using your own panels.
And I'm not quite sure who would be best to answer this question. I think I've been wondering this as well. I have seen ads, and I'm sure people here have seen ads too for portable battery generators. So things that can be used for renters, for example, that don't have a home. Would either of you recommend that, or do you have experience with those kind of technologies?
I'm happy to take that. We actually we do test those at Consumer Reports. We call them portable power stations. And the short answer is they can be a very good viable solution for if you have very limited needs in terms of what you need to charge your power. So they are not the tool you want to keep on all your lights or run electric appliances at home. They can be great for things like charging phones or laptops in an emergency. Some of them have their own sort of small scale solar panels that you can use to charge them. But generally speaking, it is vastly more costly than running a traditional generator, and also I suspect far less efficient than the systems America is talking about, which are really designed to produce large quantities of electricity and backup power. So again, sort of not a bad option if you want to make sure that you can charge your phones, but you can also just take the cheaper route and buy portable battery power backup packs, and have those if you need to be able to charge a phone on the go.
And I've also seen this question a few times too. I know, the vast majority of our webinar today has been talking about generators or about solar and backup battery storage. Would you all recommend any other options, any either cheaper options for people who can't afford those or hesitant of making such a large investment, or for people who are renters and can't make that sort of investment without their landlord's permission?
I would say that, within the world of generators, there is a subcategory that we refer to as recreational generators, and they are typically the smallest and the lowest output. But they're typically like the little boombox sized generators that you might have seen people bring to a tailgate or picnic or even camping. They produce up to about 2,000 watts of power, so nothing crazy, but honestly enough to power, say, a single space heater, a single window AC, plus a phone at the same, maybe charge a phone at the same time, and a few lights. They're a very good option for people who are a little bit intimidated by the really big portable generators. Those tools weigh about 200 pounds. These smaller recreational generators start around $400, and they weigh as little as 40 pounds. So they're much sort of easier to use. They also use far less gasoline, of course, because they're not producing as much power. Um, and we've gotten some really good results out of them. Just keep in mind they're not going to power a whole house, but they can power a handful of essentials, and they can really fill in that need if you're intimidated by a big whole house generator.
And another question for you, Paul, specifically. There's a question about if generators are safe for townhome communities that don't have that 20 feet of distance available. There's a similar question for you, America, about townhomes, but I'll let Paul answer first.
Unfortunately, the short answer is no. It's the only way in which a gas burning generator is ever safe is if it can be used at least 20 feet from not only your home but from anyone else's home as well.
And then America, for a townhome, is there typically enough roof space to have rooftop solar panels that would be helpful during an outage?
Again, no one size fits all. I would definitely get proposals from installers. There should be, but I know that there are some, of course, some wonky roofs. Typically, you need about 200, excuse me, square feet available on the roof. You're muted, Claire.
Oh, sorry about that. So somebody is also asking if you can speak to the pros and cons, America, of leasing a solar system panel for your home rather than buying it.
Yeah, typically the people that I have spoken with have purchased them. I can get back to you. Please send me an email. Please reach out to our help desk and we can discuss a little bit more there. Keep in mind that if you are purchasing, you are also able to claim that 30% tax credit as well. And there was something that I wanted to address that was in the comments. Do I have the opportunity to do that now?
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead.
Perfect. So when it comes to the cost of batteries, they're anywhere from 10 to 20K. Yes, there are other batteries that are not Tesla Powerwalls. And yes, you can get the federal income tax credit. You don't have to, wait until it comes to Texas at all or anything along those lines.
Okay, great. And more questions for you, America. Does home insurance generally cover damage to solar panels? Or if there's damage to solar panels, where does that repair cost come from?
Yeah, so whenever people install solar, we tell them to call their insurance company and make sure that it's insured as well. Make sure that you add that into like the home value. Keep in mind that you're also going to have, hopefully, warranties from your installer. You could also have, of course, like inverter warranties and anything from your insurance. So I do believe that you should be able to claim it.
Great, thank you. And Paul, there's a question here about that 20 feet rule. Is that just for portable generators or also for whole home generators?
That is just for portable generators. Whole home generators, the exact distance varies based on your local building code, but in some cases it's as little as 3 or 5 feet, and people may have even seen them installed immediately adjacent to homes. So it is, in many cases, a better option if you simply don't have 20 feet of space to run a portable generator from.
Great. And I'm not seeing this question in either the chat or the Q&A, but it's one that I get often. So I wanted to ask both of you about it. So if you are a homeowner and you either get a home generator or you get a solar panel system plus batteries, what happens if you move? And how does that affect if it's hard or easy to sell your home?
Generally with with a whole home generator, you're not going to take it with you, but it should make the sale easier, particularly if you're in an area where there are frequent outages. It's very often a selling point. In terms of a portable generator, that's something that you might work out with a potential buyer. You know, if you've already paid an electrician to install an interlock device or transfer switch in your home, you might offer to include the generator as part of the sale. But typically, it's not a very expensive thing if you're buying a portable. As I mentioned, I think most will fall in the range of $700 to $1,200, and of course start to depreciate immediately. So it's not nearly as much a consideration, I think, as with a whole home, or I'm sure as it is with solar.
So Zillow has a study saying that solar increases the value by 4.1%. Keep in mind, you should get a realtor that's knowledgeable about solar as well. And you can also transfer ownership. However, you can also pay to have the panels removed and taken into your new home.
And America, if the new buyer of your home does take ownership of your home with the solar panels, what happens to that loan originally signed for those panels? To that loan for the panels? Does the loan transfer too?
Let me look into that. It should be rolled into the house cost.
Okay, great. And let's see. I think we are just about out of time for today. Are there any final thoughts, Paul or America, that either of you want to offer that we haven't been able to get to?
I would just say that at Consumer Reports, we're also big fans of solar. So it is, you know, I think I saw one question in the comments asking about the effect on the environment of all of these gas or you know, or natural gas powered generators running in tandem in the event of an outage. And the tragic reality of generators is that they contribute to the very same kind of severe weather events that they're also meant to provide power through. So, you know, that irony is sort of not lost on us. So, you know, they can be great, they can be life savings, but they, you know, they're a great source of backup power, but that is all they are. And, you know, they're limited in terms of you know, what solar can offer, which is a totally different.
To add to that point, I also think it's important to state that you aren't just going to use your panels or a battery during a storm. Unfortunately, we do know that storms like Hurricane Beryl will become more prevalent. We will see more of those in Houston, and this isn't going to be the last time. So I'm really glad that you're here. I'm really glad that you're getting answers to your questions, and I also want to add that this is something that you can use for your home as well. So like I said, I'm getting $400 energy bills. I remember sitting in my living room in July thinking, well, if I owned a home, I would have solar, I would have a battery. So it is something that there is a benefit to it as well. Keep in mind that you are making an investment. Typically, solar panels last anywhere from 20 to 25 years.
Great. Well, thank you so much, America and Paul, for your time and for your expertise. And for anybody who's joining us today, again, we will be providing paywall-free resources from Consumer Reports, a very detailed guides on the generators that they've tested and their recommendations. We'll also be providing a link to Solar United Neighbors Help Desk, which also has a place where you can sign up for a phone call consultation to send over your proposals for evaluation, and just to ask any other questions that you have that might be for your specific situation. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I hope this was helpful. And, you know, if you all have any other thoughts on what questions we should ask in the future, happy to send those my way. My email is Claire, CLAIRE, .hao@houstonchronicle.com. Thank you so much.